Hello and welcome to the Power of Muscle podcast. In today's podcast, we're going to be reviewing one of the biggest myths about aging and muscle loss, and how muscle loss as you age from your 25 to 50-year-olds to 50 to 75-year-olds, that you'll be so surprised to find out that a 75-year-old lifelong exerciser for a 75-year-old has virtually no change in its ability and capabilities than a 25-year-old. So what's happened here is I want to bring to you some of the amazing research that's come out and bring some more detail and more highlight to how we can really break open this myth that you're going to have less muscle tone, less muscle capabilities when you get to be 75 years old. And again, I'm Miles Betcha, Bachelor of Science in Health, and I want to bring you to some amazing information as with our guests and other team members with the Power of Muscle. And the Power of Muscle podcast is where we break down the proven systems, the science behind everything that has to do with health, sports performance, fitness, and nutrition. So let's dive right into this here. And there was a study done 4 years ago that came out in the Journal of Applied Physiology, and it was done over at one of our universities at Ball State University. And this is where they studied some lifelong exercisers. So people who have been exercising. There was a big push, about 30, 40 years ago, where people said, hey, you exercise, you keep your muscles toned, you eat well, you're going to stay in great shape. So they have a whole spectrum of people now that are, 75 years old, around that age, plus or minus a few years, that they're able to study, who have been actually exercising week in and week out throughout their whole life. And they took a large number of these, about 70 people, and they were able to evaluate their muscle biopsy. So it took a small pea-sized piece of muscle out of the side of the thigh muscle, the strong outer thigh muscle, and they compared it to the same exercises of a 25-year-old exerciser. So talking an exerciser, meaning somebody's working out regularly, they have a certain protocol for the study that they wanted to have, where they had people that were exercising a certain number of times per week and those things. So let's look at the science here. So you take somebody who's been exercising, 75-year-old, they've been exercising for 40 or more years, 50 years in general, from age 25 all the way to 75. So they're looking at a 50-year spectrum here of exercise, week in and week out, and eating well as well, and they can perform the same. There's no significant difference on a test for exercise for their capillary, meaning the blood flow to the muscle. The muscles get the same blood flow as a 25-year-old, and the metabolic activity of that muscle is the same as a 25-year-old. They can literally, looking at the data, not see any difference in the muscle. So if you look at the 25-year-old exercise enthusiast or the 75-year-old enthusiast, their thigh muscles, you can't tell the difference between the two. So just take that in for a minute. You cannot see any difference. They look exactly the same. The muscles have been rejuvenating and staying healthy for 50 years so that they look like a 25-year-old's metabolic activity and blood flow capacity. Just take that in for a moment, okay? So how amazing is that, right? Let's look at it one more other way of saying it, that the people who don't exercise, right? The science saying the people who don't exercise have a significant drop in their strength and capacity of those thigh muscles. Now let's look at it on the other side. Like, you're exercising for 50 years, you're now 75 years old. You can perform with your legs as long as you've been, fairly injury-free, right? You get those leg muscles are working. You can perform as a 25-year-old. We know that, many 75 or older are running marathons, right? They're running marathons into their 80s and 90s. And again, showing that we'll have to see. Hopefully, maybe we encourage them to do a study with 90-year-olds or maybe 100-year-old people who can still run a marathon. Check out their muscle biopsy of their thigh muscle, because this is saying so much for the power of muscle. Okay, this means that if you're staying strong and you're doing your aerobic activity and you're doing your strengthening, flexibility, you're eating good to maintain the rejuvenation of those muscles, which there is a system to that. You know, that's what we do at the Power Muscle Heal, is we're making sure you understand the system that behind what you need to do to eat properly and to rejuvenate your muscles with your foods, so that you have this gateway, right? This gateway and this process and system to go through to make sure the blueprint for you is to get to 75 years old and or older and have amazing muscle tone, strength, and metabolic activity capacity like a 25-year-old. Okay, and here at Mind Muscle Memory, we have an article that we talk about this. It's the 7 myths of strength training and building lean muscle. So we're looking at this in a way of that lean muscle is your gateway to success, no matter what your goal is. But you also need a system to do so. And we go through the 7 myths. Myths like, you're going to lose your flexibility when you strength train. Well, if you work on the right strength training and the right range of motion, and you also add in stretching to your regular routine, you're going to actually maintain a more mobile an elasticity to that muscle, and you're going to keep the muscle fascia, which is the fascia is what's wrapped around that muscle and throughout that muscle to keep it super strong. But that fascia has to have its flexibility to it. So you keep that active and strong, and you're going to have very solid lean muscle, but it's going to have excellent range of motion. So you're not going to have loss of flexibility. You're not going to get bulky. Okay, you're not going to, as long as you maintain the flexibility and the mobility of the muscle, you're not going to get bulky. It's not going to make you slower. And actually keeping strength training as part of your protocol, and you're engaged those muscles properly with mind muscle memory and getting muscle memory development, you're actually going to keep the skeletal muscle healthier. Okay, so these myths are all things that we go through, and this one in particular that we want to highlight today in this episode is the myth busted about aging. So aging muscle is not going to is not going to become weaker, or it's not going to become less metabolically active. It's going to actually maintain that for years and years, decades, so 80 years. And one thing we like to highlight on this is that there's athletes now in their 40s, 42, 44. They're playing professional sports. They're whether they're an Olympic athlete of 39, 40 years old, or whether they're a quarterback like Tom Brady going into his mid 40s. So this study, right, over here at Ball State University, and that's published in the Journal of Applied Physiology, shows that Tom Brady keeps strong, and he keeps eating well, and he keeps going throughout his aerobic activity conditioning. He could actually play probably another 30 years, right? From 45 to 75. If he can maintain an injury-free environment and recover from injury properly, this study's saying he could keep going. And so could many others. But the biggest part here is a lifelong exercise. Pick a lifelong exercise that you like to do, and that's challenging for you, but you stick with it. Whether it's swimming, biking, running, a combination of those. Use your strengthening and your flexibility training and mobility training so that you can stay supple in those muscles, and eat to rejuvenate. That's the pattern that we have at Mind Muscle Memory and the Power of Muscle system. is that that's our base, right? That's our base. We're always working to keep our body cleansed, our digestive system cleansed with fiber, keeping enough protein coming in, 60 grams minimum per day, so that you have, 3-4 meals that you're making sure you have adequate 15 grams of protein per meal or more, somewhere around there, so that you can't digest more than 30-35 grams of protein per meal. So you have to get in that 15 to 20 4 times a day. So these are the things that we bring you through. You can go to mindmusclememory.com and see more about our 5-day detox that we have available now. We have the Power of Muscle. We have the Power Muscle Podcast. So subscribe to the Power Muscle Podcast and come over to Mind Muscle Memory. Follow us on our social media where we put up tips and proven research like this all the time for you. So please comment. Let us know what you think of this episode of the Power Muscle. And we look forward to hearing more from you and sharing more of the health tips and busting and myth busting that we'll do for this program. Thank you so much. Have a great day.